Why sister-in-law secretly coached her friend to seduce my husband while I was 7 months pregnant, with texts like, "Today's the day, he won't be able to resist anymore." When I exposed their scheme, she sneered that I'd trapped him with a baby. I stayed silent. That was a year ago, and this morning she sent a package to our daughter from prison. My husband's half-sister appears to be orchestrating a romantic connection between him and her closest companion. This sibling relationship stems from a past infidelity. Their mother's affair led to his father's departure when my husband was 12, following a DNA test that revealed she was not his biological child. My father-in-law subsequently distanced himself from her, yet maintained a strong bond with my husband. Consequently, my sister-in-law exhibits extreme dependence on my husband. He, in turn, is fiercely defensive of her, typically dismissing any criticism directed her way, despite her occasional unpredictable and unstable behavior. She even wept at our engagement celebration, upset about not receiving presents. Last year, my husband and I acquired a residence featuring an indoor swimming facility. My sister-in-law expressed great enthusiasm upon seeing it, inquiring if she and her friend could utilize it occasionally. We agreed, provided they informed us in advance of their arrival. She and her friend, Chloe, had frequented it numerous times previously, though rarely when my husband was present. With the recent resurgence of a certain virus, my husband sometimes began working remotely. My sister-in-law approached me about her and Chloe visiting to use the pool. I conveyed my discomfort with their presence, given my pregnancy, but she then proposed a 2-week isolation period for herself and Chloe, asking if they could visit afterward. My husband assented. 2 weeks later, they arrived at our home. My husband was occupied in his study, so they proceeded directly to the swimming area after a brief exchange of pleasantries. After approximately an hour, my husband emerged, joining me in the kitchen. My sister-in-law entered seeking a beverage and engaged him in conversation. Before returning to the pool, she remarked, "Chloe will be so pleased to see you." This comment struck me as peculiar, given that my husband and Chloe shared no particular closeness. 2 minutes later, Chloe appeared in the kitchen, soaking wet, her towel offering minimal coverage. She then spent the remainder of her time conversing with my husband until he politely withdrew to resume his duties. Her demeanor was overtly cheerful and effusive when addressing him. His sarcastic remarks would elicit exaggerated laughter, as if they were the most amusing jokes she had ever encountered. It truly seemed as though she was attempting to charm him. Prior to rejoining her friend, she cast an unsettling, knowing glance in my direction. Before their departure, they inquired if my husband would be working remotely throughout the week, which he affirmed. For the subsequent fortnight, they visited our residence daily for swimming, with the notable exception that Chloe never entered the water. Instead, she lingered indoors, consistently clad in her bikini. Whenever my husband emerged to spend time with me, she would promptly interject, monopolizing his attention until he needed to return to his tasks. One day, I prepared lunch for everyone, and as I excused myself to summon my husband, my sister-in-law swiftly intervened, suggesting Chloe could call him instead. They exchanged a significant glance, and Chloe appeared genuinely delighted as she went to fetch him. Chloe also began exhibiting more physical contact with my husband, placing her hands on his chest and arms, and positioning herself in close proximity. To his credit, my husband typically created distance between them whenever such instances occurred. My conviction that my sister-in-law is complicit stems from several recent disparaging remarks she's made concerning my pregnancy. She recounted an anecdote about a friend whose partner was unfaithful, then added a comment to the effect of, "Are you aware that many men begin affairs when their wives are expecting?" She also made observations about my current appearance, noting I looked chubby and odd beside my well-built husband. If she noticed my husband outside his workspace, she would promptly alert Chloe. I witnessed this firsthand yesterday when Chloe actually trailed my husband into his office. I was in the corridor and observed her discreetly enter behind him, softly closing the door. My pulse quickened as I approached. Through the thin partition, I heard her characteristic forced, high-pitched laughter that had become a constant presence all week. My husband's tone was resolute yet courteous, requesting her departure due to an impending conference call. She did not comply at once. I overheard her remarking on his diligent work ethic and how he merited someone who truly valued him. The door suddenly swung open, and my husband exited, his jaw clenched. Chloe appeared behind him, adjusting her swimwear and giving me yet another of her unsettling, knowing glances as she walked past. That evening, after their departure, I attempted to discuss the situation with my husband. He was seated at the kitchen island, engrossed in emails on his laptop. I rested a hand on my expanding abdomen and inhaled deeply. He glanced up as I brought up Chloe's conduct, his demeanor instantly becoming guarded. He claimed I was overthinking the matter, asserting that Chloe was merely being amiable. When I highlighted her physical contact and persistent disruptions, he simply shrugged, stating he had been managing it by maintaining personal space. He then reminded me of Dianila's difficult past, particularly her father's rejection, and emphasized the significance of these pool visits to her. The dialogue concluded with him reverting to his emails, leaving me feeling more isolated than before. The following morning, Dianila messaged me, inquiring if they could arrive earlier than their usual time. She explained that Chloe had a later hair appointment and wished to sunbathe beforehand. Though I was still in my sleepwear and hadn't eaten, I agreed, anticipating that a refusal would only escalate tensions. They appeared within 20 minutes. Dianila promptly remarked on my fatigued appearance, recommending an under-eye cream she used. Chloe was already in her swimwear, a revealing red string design. My husband emerged from his study around 10 for coffee. Chloe practically darted from the pool area, water glistening on her skin. She positioned herself between my husband and the coffee machine, reaching for mugs on a high shelf, her body momentarily pressing against his before he retreated. She presented him with a mug, accompanied by a suggestive wink, then asked for assistance with her phone, claiming it wouldn't connect to our Wi-Fi. He offered to examine it later, but she persisted, touching his forearm and asserting it would only take a moment. Dianila materialized in the doorway, observing the exchange with a peculiar smile. I decided to occupy myself by preparing refreshments. As I sliced fruit, Daniela settled at the kitchen island and launched into another narrative concerning relationships. This time, it involved a colleague whose spouse had abandoned her for a younger woman shortly after their child's birth. She stressed the new partner's slender figure and more enjoyable disposition, and how the former husband felt confined by domestic life. Her gaze frequently shifted to Chloe, who remained near my husband, chuckling at something on her phone that she insisted on displaying to him. This pattern persisted for several days. Chloe's swimsuits grew progressively more revealing, her touches lingered, and her interruptions became increasingly calculated. She began referencing shared jokes from prior visits, attempting to forge an exclusive bond with my husband. One afternoon, she deliberately occupied his customary seat at the kitchen table, compelling him to sit beside her when he came out for lunch. She leaned towards him while showing him something on her phone, her chest brushing his arm. He immediately rose, stating he needed to return to work. Dianila's remarks became increasingly unkind. She spoke of how pregnancy irrevocably alters a woman's physique and how some men struggle to accept such changes. She cited statistics regarding divorce rates following childbirth, always presenting these as mere casual observations. When I challenged her, she feigned offense, claiming she was merely attempting to prepare me for reality. She then accused me of being overly emotional and suspicious, asserting I was fabricating issues where none existed. In response, I began meticulously recording every incident, each physical contact, every comment, every knowing glance. I captured images of Chloe in her minimal swimwear, noted the precise moment she trailed my husband, and logged Dianila's offensive statements on my phone. One evening, my husband discovered my actions and questioned them. Upon my explanation, he sighed deeply, stating I was becoming fixated. He maintained that Dianila would never deliberately cause me harm and that I was misinterpreting innocent actions due to hormonal fluctuations from pregnancy. The culmination occurred on a Thursday. I was 7.5 months into my pregnancy, feeling cumbersome and uneasy. Chloe arrived in attire that scarcely qualified as swimwear, merely fabric triangles connected by thin ties. She no longer even feigned swimming, simply reclining on a poolside chair strategically placed for my husband to observe her from his office window. Around midday, she entered the house, ostensibly for water. I quietly followed, discovering her outside his office door, adjusting her top to reveal more cleavage. She knocked and entered without awaiting permission. I pressed my ear to the door. She was once again commending his dedication, remarking on how fortunate any woman would be to have him. Her voice lowered, becoming more suggestive. I heard movement, then my husband's voice, sharp and unambiguous, instructing her to cease. The door burst open, and he stormed out, his face reddened with fury. Chloe appeared behind him, her lipstick smeared, reaching for his arm. He recoiled, ordering her to vacate his property at once. Dianila rushed in from the pool, demanding an explanation. My husband clarified that Chloe had attempted to kiss him. Rather than expressing shock or remorse, Dianila assailed me. She accused me of turning my husband against them, of being envious and domineering. She claimed I felt threatened by younger, more attractive women and was retaliating against Chloe. Chloe stood by, feigning distress, asserting my husband had misinterpreted her actions. My husband's expression hardened, He instructed them both to depart and not return. Daniela then began to weep genuinely, lamenting that he was prioritizing his paranoid wife over his own sister. She invoked their father, highlighting his abandonment of her, and suggesting my husband was now repeating the pattern. It was emotional coercion at its most blatant, and for a fleeting moment, I observed my husband hesitate. Then Chloe aired, muttering that I was undeserving of him and had ensnared him with a child. A profound silence enveloped the room. My husband's expression transitioned from anger to comprehension. He gazed at Daniela, truly examining her, and inquired if this entire scenario had been orchestrated. Daniela's tears ceased abruptly. She lifted her chin defiantly, asserting she was merely looking out for him, that he deserved better than a fat, paranoid wife who would only deteriorate after childbirth. She claimed Chloe understood him and could bring him happiness in ways I never could. My husband, his voice low but resolute, instructed them to leave. Daniela attempted further tears and guilt trips concerning their father, but he remained unyielding. As they gathered their belongings, Chloe's phone slipped from her bag, landing face up, its screen illuminating with messages before she could retrieve it. I glimpsed my name in the text preview. My husband picked it up. Chloe lunged for it, but he held it away and read the messages aloud. The texts exposed everything. Daniela had been coaching Chloe for weeks, detailing precisely when my husband would be available, what to wear, and how to behave. There were messages about waiting until I was too far along in my pregnancy to resist, and how men were most susceptible when their wives were least attractive. The final message, sent that morning, read, "Today's the day he won't be able to resist anymore." Chloe snatched her phone back and fled. Daniela stood motionless, her deception exposed. My husband, his voice slightly trembling, asked her why. She laughed bitterly, stating that we possessed everything: the house, the pool, a child on the way, each other, while she had nothing but a father who disowned her and a brother who tolerated her solely out of obligation. She confessed her desire to inflict pain upon me, mirroring her own suffering, and to demolish something beautiful because it was beyond her reach. My husband ordered her to depart and never contact us again. She shrieked that he would regret it, that family was supposed to remain united. He countered that family does not endeavor to ruin each other's marriages. As she stormed out, she yelled that when I became fat and boring after the baby, he would wish he had heeded her. The door slammed shut behind her, and an abrupt quiet descended upon the house. I collapsed into a kitchen chair, my hands trembling. The cumulative stress of the preceding weeks overwhelmed me in waves. My husband knelt beside me, apologizing profusely. He admitted his blindness, acknowledging that his guilt regarding Daniela's circumstances had prevented him from recognizing her true nature. He confessed to dismissing my concerns because it was simpler than confronting the reality about his sister. We embraced in the kitchen, and I wept, releasing weeks of pent-up tension and apprehension. That evening, I began experiencing contractions. The intense emotional strain had initiated premature labor. My husband drove me to the medical facility, holding my hand and vowing that circumstances would change. As we awaited the physician, he blocked Daniela's contact information on both our mobile devices. He also contacted his father for the first time in months, finally comprehending the reasons for his long-standing estrangement from Daniela. His father expressed no surprise at the events, remarking that Daniela had always exhibited manipulative tendencies, even in childhood. The doctor reassured us that the contractions were merely Braxton Hicks, induced by stress. She prescribed strict bed rest and advised me to avoid any further emotional distress. My husband assisted me into the vehicle, his hand remaining clasped in mine throughout the journey home. He repeatedly glanced at me, his face marked by worry and remorse. Upon our return, the house felt altered, more vacant, yet paradoxically more secure without the persistent threat of intrusion. The subsequent morning, my husband took a sick day from his employment. He prepared breakfast for me in bed and sat beside me, at last prepared to discuss the entirety of what had transpired. He recounted his upbringing, burdened by the reality of Daniela's presence, and how his mother would weep, imploring him to be kind to his sister because she had no other support. He elaborated on how his father's absolute repudiation of Daniela had instilled in him a sense of responsibility for her well-being, even when she overstepped boundaries. He had spent years justifying her conduct, persuading himself that her clinginess and deceit were merely manifestations of her abandonment issues. As we conversed, his phone continuously vibrated. Daniela was contacting him from various numbers, leaving voicemails that fluctuated between tearful apologies and malicious threats. She sent messages from applications we had yet to block, alternating between feigning remorse and vowing to devastate our lives. My husband displayed each message to me before deleting it, no longer concealing anything. One particularly vile text claimed she had already informed their mother that I was mistreating him, isolating him from his relatives. Another asserted she possessed images of him and Chloe that she had altered to appear incriminating. His mother telephoned that afternoon. My husband activated the speakerphone so I could listen. She was distraught, accusing me of alienating her son from his sister, of being envious and manipulative. She stated AmITheA had disclosed everything, how I had forbidden her from our home, how I had falsely accused Chloe of heinous acts, and how I was using the baby to ensnare my husband. My husband calmly presented the facts to his mother, including the text messages and the attempted kiss. His mother fell silent, then suggested AmITheA was simply bewildered and that we were overreacting. She proposed a dinner gathering for us all to resolve the issues. My husband declined and terminated the call. The immense pressure was adversely impacting my pregnancy. I struggled to retain food, and my blood pressure surged. My husband escorted me back to the physician, who placed me on restricted bed rest and cautioned that if my condition did not improve, early labor induction might be necessary. The infant was measuring small, likely attributable to my difficulty with proper nutrition. I felt as though I was failing my child even before her birth, solely due to Daniela's malicious schemes. My husband engaged a security firm to replace all our locks and install surveillance cameras, leaving nothing to chance given Daniela's escalating menaces. The security consultant noted that in such family disputes, individuals often intensify their actions when communication is severed. He recommended meticulous documentation and consideration of a protective order. The prospect of pursuing legal measures against a family member caused my husband discomfort, but he consented to retain it as a potential course of action. 3 days following the confrontation, Chloe appeared at our entrance. My husband was showering, so I responded through the security chain. She appeared altered, no cosmetics, dressed in ordinary attire rather than swimwear. She requested a conversation. Against my better judgment, I permitted her to remain on the porch while I listened through the slightly ajar door. She asserted that AmITheA had also manipulated her, promising that my husband was discontent and seeking an escape. She claimed AmITheA had been supplying her with intelligence for months, displaying images of my husband and recounting tales of his alleged complaints about me. Chloe then produced her phone, revealing additional messages I had not seen. AmITheA had constructed an intricate fabrication where my husband was secretly enamored with Chloe, but felt bound to me due to the impending child. She had informed Chloe that I was emotionally abusive, controlled his finances, and made him miserable. These messages dated back 6 months, long before the pool visits commenced. This scheme had been conceived even before my pregnancy. Chloe professed profound regret upon realizing the falsehoods. Yet I noted her failure to apologize for attempting to kiss my husband or for parading scantily clad in my residence. My husband descended the stairs as Chloe was departing. I recounted her entire narrative. He was incensed by her presence at our home, but also deeply troubled by the timeline. 6 months of planning implied Daniela had been conspiring while attending our family gatherings, feigning excitement about the baby, and embracing me as a sister. The treachery was more profound than we had initially grasped. That night, unable to sleep, I reviewed our online photo albums. In image after image, the truth was now evident. Daniela's insincere smiles, her deliberate positioning beside my husband, how she angled her body away from me in our pregnancy announcement photograph, her gaze fixed on him, not the lens. At our housewarming celebration, she had spent the entire event shadowing him. How could I have been so oblivious? My husband discovered me weeping over the laptop at 3 a.m. He gently closed it and guided me back to bed. He vowed we would navigate this together, that Daniela would never harm us again. Yet, even as he embraced me, I sensed the strain in his physique. He was mourning the sister he believed he had, the relationship he had so strenuously endeavored to preserve despite all the warning signs. The subsequent week presented fresh difficulties. Daniela began appearing at my husband's place of employment. Although security personnel would escort her away, she would linger outside the premises for extended periods, weeping and creating a public disturbance. His colleagues began inquiring, and his supervisor privately questioned him about his domestic situation. The professional standing he had diligently cultivated was being compromised by association with her theatrics. Next, a social media offensive commenced. Daniela established numerous counterfeit accounts to post comments on her own pictures, disseminating falsehoods about mistreatment and infidelity. She uploaded old photographs of herself and my husband, accompanied by captions asserting that I had ruined their bond. She even fabricated a profile impersonating me, publishing dreadful content about her, which she then screenshotted as proof of my alleged malice. We reported each account, but new ones emerged more rapidly than they could be removed. My husband's mother initiated calls to relatives, propagating Daniela's narrative. His aunt telephoned to admonish him about familial allegiance, and his cousin messaged to express disappointment in his treatment of his sister. The family, who had scarcely acknowledged Daniela's presence for years, suddenly united around her, collectively condemning us. My husband spent countless hours on the phone clarifying the truth, but Daniela had disseminated her account first, and people chose to believe what suited them. The strain was severely impacting our marital relationship. My husband grew distant, dedicating more hours to work to evade the situation. When at home, he was perpetually on his phone, either erasing messages from Daniela or disputing with family members. I felt as though I was losing him to the very turmoil we had sought to escape. One evening, I discovered him in the nursery we had begun decorating, simply standing there, looking disoriented. He confessed his apprehension. Fear that Daniela's harassment would be ceaseless, that our daughter would mature within this toxic environment, and that he had failed as a brother and would similarly fail as a parent. I was 8 months pregnant when Daniela's behavior escalated once more. She commenced a new relationship and enlisted her partner to stalk us. They would remain in a vehicle outside our residence, merely observing. When my husband confronted them, the boyfriend asserted ignorance of any protective order. We had not yet filed one, and claimed Daniela had informed him I was holding her niece captive. The authorities were summoned, but as they were not technically on our property, little could be done beyond requesting their departure. My physician grew increasingly alarmed about my well-being. The baby was not gaining weight appropriately, and my blood pressure remained dangerously elevated. She advised inducing labor at 37 weeks if conditions did not improve. The prospect of bringing my daughter into such turmoil terrified me. I began experiencing panic attacks, struggling to breathe, when contemplating Daniela potentially harming our child as retaliation. My husband finally broke down and telephoned his father. They had not communicated since the night at the hospital, but he required guidance from someone who comprehended Daniela's destructive capacity. His father listened silently as my husband recounted the entire ordeal. Upon completion, his father sighed, remarking that he had hoped Daniela would mature, but some individuals were simply inherently flawed. He offered to contribute to legal fees if necessary, the first time he had acknowledged any responsibility for the situation. The conversation with his father appeared to instigate a shift within my husband. He returned home with a resolve I had not witnessed in weeks. He had scheduled an appointment with a family attorney to discuss our options, and had also arranged for us to stay with his father for a few days, seeking respite from our home and the incessant surveillance. Most significantly, he had composed a letter to Daniela, not for dispatch, but to process his own emotions. He read the letter to me. In it, he reminded Daniela of all the instances he had defended her, all the relationships he had jeopardized to safeguard her feelings, all the guilt he had carried regarding their father's rejection of her. He wrote of his desire to be the brother she required, how he had disregarded every warning sign, believing that love entailed unconditional acceptance. He explained how her actions had nearly cost him his marriage and potentially his child's health. The letter concluded with his forgiveness, but also an acknowledgement that forgiveness did not imply readmission into our lives. We resided at his father's dwelling for 3 days. Initially, the atmosphere was strained. His father had never been overtly affectionate, and the house felt like a relic. However, they gradually began to converse. His father recounted anecdotes from Daniela's early childhood, the falsehoods she had spun even as a toddler, the manner in which she had coerced her mother into extramarital relationships by fomenting discord between her parents. He disclosed that the liaison resulting in Daniela's birth was not the first, merely the first to culminate in a pregnancy. Daniela's biological father had desired no involvement with her, a fact his father speculated had fundamentally damaged her psychological well-being. During our absence, Daniela unlawfully entered our home. The surveillance footage captured her every action. She utilized a key we were unaware she possessed, likely duplicated during one of her pool visits. She ransacked our bedroom, closets, and the nursery. She photographed every item, including private papers. She spray-painted baby killer on the nursery wall and placed a decapitated doll in the recently assembled crib. She remained in the house for under 10 minutes, yet the infringement felt immense. The authorities at last treated the situation with gravity. Forced entry, malicious damage, and the implicit menace of the dismembered doll sufficed for criminal charges. They apprehended Daniela at her apartment, where they discovered proof of her fixation. Hundreds of printed images of my husband, screenshots of our social media, and journals filled with strategies to dissolve our relationship. She had been meticulously recording our daily habits, noting our presence at home, our medical appointments, and moments of vulnerability. My husband was compelled to review this evidence as part of the legal process. He returned home visibly shaken, unable to comprehend that the sister he had shielded for so long was capable of such deliberate malevolence. The journals disclosed that she had been devising variations of this plot for years, awaiting the opportune moment. Our pregnancy had served as the catalyst, the ultimate representation of the family she believed she merited but could not attain. Dianila's apprehension exacerbated the situation before any improvement. Their mother became excessively active, contacting everyone she knew to solicit backing for her daughter. She retained legal counsel who promptly began fabricating a narrative. Dianila was experiencing a mental health crisis, triggered by early life trauma, and required assistance, not retribution. The local media covered the incident, portraying it as a family disagreement that had spiraled out of control. Our identities remained undisclosed, but anyone familiar with us could deduce the specifics. I commenced labor 2 weeks prematurely, the cumulative stress finally overwhelming my body's capacity to safeguard the infant. It was a challenging delivery. The baby was diminutive, and my blood pressure surged perilously. For a few terrifying hours, medical professionals were uncertain if both of us would endure. My husband later confided that it was the most dreadful night of his existence, surpassing even the discovery of Daniela's treachery. He had waited in the reception area, imploring a deity he did not believe in, vowing anything if we survived. We did survive. Our daughter was minuscule yet spirited, battling her way into the world despite every obstacle. When the nurse placed her upon my chest, I experienced an overwhelming surge of protective instinct unlike any I had known. This tiny individual relied entirely on us, and I would undertake any measure to shield her from the turmoil that had characterized her prenatal period. My husband wept upon holding her for the first time. He murmured pledges to her, that she would always be cherished, perpetually shielded, never manipulated or exploited as a mere instrument in another's schemes. He spoke to her of the virtuous aspects of our family, the individuals who would adore her unconditionally, without ulterior motives. He made no mention of Dianila, the aunt she would never come to know. We remained hospitalized for 5 days as our daughter gained weight and my blood pressure stabilized. During this period, my husband managed the continuing legal proceedings. Dianila's legal representative was advocating for a plea agreement that encompassed compulsory therapy rather than incarceration. The prosecutor cautioned us that, given her unblemished record and familial ties, she would likely receive, at most, probation. This felt like a profound affront after all she had subjected us to. But my husband stated he no longer cared about punitive measures. He simply desired her complete removal from our lives. His father visited us at the hospital, presenting a plush elephant for the infant, the first baby gift he had ever bestowed. He confessed to holding his granddaughter with some awkwardness but great tenderness, and I observed a newfound gentleness in his demeanor. He expressed his pride in my husband for safeguarding his family and for disrupting the pattern of enablement that had permitted Dianila to become who she was. He offered to assist us in relocating, should we desire a new beginning somewhere Dianila could not locate us. The prospect of relocation grew more attractive upon our return home. Even with the nursery freshly painted and the security mechanisms reconfigured, the house felt defiled. Every chamber evoked recollections of Chloe's attempted enticement, of Dianila's insidious machinations, and of the weeks of anxiety that had almost cost us everything. The swimming pool, once a desirable feature, now seemed like a site of transgression. We could not gaze upon it without remembering. My husband's employer presented him with an opportunity for transfer to their West Coast branch. This would entail abandoning all familiarity, commencing anew in a metropolis where our narrative was unknown. We would be 3,000 miles removed from Dianila, from his mother, and from the relatives who still perceived us as antagonists. However, it also meant forsaking our existing support network, my parents, our genuine friends, the life we had constructed prior to the unraveling of events. We engaged in extensive nocturnal discussions while our daughter peacefully slept between us. The legal proceedings against Dianila were advancing, yet her attorney had successfully portrayed her as a casualty of mental affliction, intensified by familial trauma. She had been released on bail, subject to conditions, no contact with us, compulsory therapy, and periodic meetings with a probation officer. Nevertheless, we understood that such stipulations held no meaning for an individual who had spent months conspiring our ruin. The decision was effectively made for us when Dianila breached her bail conditions. She did not contact us directly, but dispatched Chloe to execute her malicious task. Chloe approached me at the grocery store, my daughter secured to my chest in a carrier. She stated Daniela desired to apologize, was undergoing treatment, and merely wished to see the infant once. When I attempted to depart, Chloe seized my arm and hissed that I had shattered a family and would pay for my actions. Another shopper intervened, and Chloe fled, but the damage was inflicted. I sat in my car, trembling, holding my daughter close, recognizing we would never be secure as long as we remained. My husband submitted his transfer request that night. His company accelerated the process upon his explanation of the circumstances. Within 2 weeks, they had arranged for moving services, temporary corporate lodging, and a position that included a modest salary increase. His father facilitated a swift sale of the house, incurring a financial loss but gaining liberation. We informed only our closest confidants and my parents of our destination, swearing them to secrecy. Daniela was rearrested for violating bail after we reported the grocery store incident. This time, the judge entirely revoked her bail. She would await trial in custody, her lawyer's protests unheeded. My husband did not attend the hearing, but his father did, reporting back that Daniela had shrieked and wept, asserting we had ruined her existence. Yet even when facing consequences, she could not accept accountability for her deeds. Our final week in town was bittersweet. My parents spent every conceivable moment with their granddaughter, capturing countless photographs and videos. They comprehended our necessity to depart, but mourned the geographical separation it would impose. My mother meticulously helped me pack the nursery, carefully wrapping each item we had chosen with such optimism before our lives imploded. She vowed frequent visits, promising not to let distance diminish her bond with the baby. My husband met with the prosecutor one last time. They had offered Daniela a settlement, 2 years probation, mandatory psychiatric treatment, and a perpetual protective order. If she violated any terms, she would serve 5 years in prison. It was not the justice we had envisioned, but it was a resolution. The prosecutor assured us that with our relocation and the legal constraints, Daniela would struggle to locate us, let alone harass us. His mother made a final attempt at reconciliation. She appeared at our doorstep the night before our departure, looking older and diminished than I recalled. She implored my husband to reconsider, claiming Daniela was receiving help that family should forgive. My husband permitted her to see the baby through the window, but denied her entry. He informed her that forgiveness did not equate to forgetting, and protecting his daughter meant keeping her away from anyone who enabled Daniela's conduct. His mother departed weeping, but for once, her tears did not sway him. We drove away from our residence at dawn, the baby slumbering peacefully in her car seat. My husband reached over and grasped my hand as we crossed the city limits. In the rearview mirror, I observed our former life receding. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also hope. Hope for an existence free from manipulation, from toxic familial dynamics, from the perpetual dread of Daniela's next action. We had forfeited much: family connections, our ideal home, our sense of security. Yet, we had also gained something: the realization that we could endure anything together, that our affection was more potent than any attempt to dismantle it. The cross-country journey spanned 5 days. We halted at various roadside inns, dined in modest eateries, and gradually sensed the burden of the preceding months dissipating. Each mile increased the distance between us and the turmoil. Our daughter witnessed her inaugural sunset in New Mexico and her first mountains in Colorado. My husband displayed more genuine smiles during those 5 days than he had in months. By the time we reached the Pacific Ocean, we felt transformed, marked but mending, injured but complete. Our new dwelling, a confined 2-bedroom apartment, overlooked the Pacific and cost double our previous mortgage. My husband established his home workspace in a corner of our bedroom, while I arranged the baby's belongings in the diminutive nursery. The building lacked a swimming pool, possessing only a small courtyard with wilting flora. Our daughter remained unconcerned, captivated by the gulls that alighted on our balcony. During the initial week, we constantly glanced over our shoulders. Every woman with dark hair caused my heart to pound. My husband installed additional security measures and a doorbell camera, despite our 3rd-floor location. He would awaken nightly to inspect the windows, then stand over the baby's crib, simply observing her respiration. I observed him compulsively searching Daniela's name online, seeking any indication of her release or discovery of our whereabouts. His new colleagues extended an invitation to a weekend barbecue. We nearly declined, yet recognized that isolation was equally detrimental. At the gathering, someone inquired about visiting family. My husband's jaw tensed as he stated we were not close with relatives. The host's wife, Catherine, must have perceived something, as she swiftly altered the topic. Later, she drew me aside, mentioning her own relocation here to escape a detrimental family dynamic. She did not probe, merely offered me her contact information. 3 weeks into our new existence, my husband's phone rang at 2 a.m. His mother's number illuminated the display. We had neglected to block her on his professional device. He allowed the call to divert to voicemail. Her message was indistinct, likely due to intoxication. She rambled about how we had ruined AmITheA, how she was incarcerated because of our falsehoods, how we had abducted her grandchild. She concluded by stating she had retained a private investigator to locate us. My husband erased the message and blocked the number, but sleep eluded him once more that night. I began attending a new mother's assembly at the local community center. The other women exchanged birthing experiences and lamented sleepless nights. When questioned about my delivery, I kept my response imprecise, merely mentioning it was premature due to strain. One mother, Kathy, had also delivered early. Her son had spent weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit. We connected over our tiny infants who had battled their way into existence. She became my first genuine friend here, someone unfamiliar with our past. My husband immersed himself in his work. His new team was initiating a significant undertaking, and the extended hours provided him with direction. He would return home exhausted, yet somehow lighter. His supervisor was impressed by his commitment, mentioning possibilities for career progression. For the first time in months, he spoke of the future without that haunted expression. Then Chloe discovered my Instagram profile. I had set it to private, but she created a fraudulent account, posing as a member of my mother's group. The message was concise: she's getting out soon. She knows where you are. I immediately showed my husband. He contacted his father, who verified Daniela remained in detention awaiting trial. The message was a fabrication, but the harm was inflicted. I deactivated all my social media accounts that evening. My parents journeyed to celebrate our daughter's 3-month landmark. They endeavored to conceal their sorrow regarding the distance, concentrating instead on her growth. My mother held her incessantly, committing every minute detail to memory. My father assisted my husband in installing enhanced security latches, neither of them explicitly acknowledging the reason for such measures. When they departed, my mother embraced me tightly and whispered that we had made the correct choice. The prosecuting attorney telephoned with an update. Daniela had accepted the plea bargain: 2 years probation, compulsory therapy, and a permanent protective mandate. She would be released in a week. My husband's hand trembled as he recorded the information. The prosecutor reminded us that breaching the order entailed automatic incarceration and that we were legally safeguarded. Yet we both understood that mere documentation could not deter someone intent on causing harm. Catherine extended an invitation for dinner. Her husband, Theodore, was an attorney who had managed his share of familial conflicts. Without divulging specifics, my husband inquired about the enforceability of protective orders. Theodore clarified the reality. Their effectiveness was contingent upon the individual's willingness to comply. He offered to suggest a colleague specializing in harassment cases. We declined, not yet prepared to explore that avenue. Our daughter began sleeping through the entire night, a minor achievement that felt monumental after all we had endured. My husband would quietly enter her room simply to observe her peaceful slumber. One evening, I discovered him there, silently weeping. He remarked on her apparent innocence, her unawareness of the turmoil that had encircled her birth. He reiterated his vow that she would never experience such manipulation. His father telephoned with news. Daniela had been released and immediately proceeded to their former residence. She had remained outside, screaming for hours until neighbors alerted the authorities. She was apprehended for breaching the protective order. We had been unaware it encompassed the property. This time, the magistrate showed no leniency. She received 6 months imprisonment, with no plea bargains. His father reported that their mother had collapsed in court, imploring them to reconsider. I resumed employment on a part-time basis, securing a remote role that allowed me to remain at home with the infant. My new associates were unaware of swimming facilities, sisters-in-law, or protective mandates. To them, I was merely another working mother balancing feeding routines and virtual conferences. The sense of normalcy felt unfamiliar, yet embraced. My husband would care for the baby during crucial meetings, gently bouncing her while he worked at his standing desk. Kathy introduced me to her sister-in-law, who operated a small childcare service from her residence. We visited to evaluate it for when I transitioned to full-time work. The woman was amiable, her home bright and inviting, featuring no pools, only a modest sandbox in the rear garden. Our daughter instinctively reached for the other infants, already sociable despite her tumultuous beginning. We placed ourselves on the waiting list. My husband's corporation advanced him to a team leadership role. The position included a considerable salary increase and more favorable hours. He accepted without hesitation, viewing it as another stride away from our past existence. His new professional cards arrived, bearing our revised address. He gazed at them for an extended period before placing them in his wallet, a seemingly trivial item that symbolized our fresh start. Then his cousin located us, not physically, but via LinkedIn. The message was lengthy and condemnatory. He labeled us as heartless, asserting that family should pardon family, and that Daniela was suffering incarceration due to our vindictiveness. He mentioned that their grandmother was unwell, potentially terminally ill, and questioned how we could withhold her great-grandchild during her final days. My husband did not reply. He captured screenshots of the entire message for our documentation and blocked the sender. Catherine arranged a beach excursion for several families. We nearly declined, as beaches implied swimwear, and swimwear evoked unsettling recollections. However, our daughter had never witnessed the ocean firsthand. She shrieked with delight when the waves brushed her tiny feet, grasping handfuls of sand with childlike wonder. Other parents exchanged refreshments and sun protection. No one mentioned swimming pools or inquired why I stiffened when someone adjusted their swimsuit strap. 6 months elapsed. Daniela was released once more. This time, she did not seek us out. His father reported she had relocated to her mother's residence, was undergoing therapy, and had secured employment at a retail establishment. She had purportedly informed others that she no longer had a brother. This news should have brought solace, but we were too discerning to place faith in her apparent changes. Our rental agreement approached its expiration. The property owner proposed a 2-year lease with a negligible increase, which we promptly accepted. This modest apartment, devoid of a swimming pool, had become our haven. Our daughter took her inaugural steps in the confined corridor. She uttered her first word, bird, on the balcony. Every significant developmental event occurred here, unblemished by past traumas. My husband enrolled in a weekend basketball league through his workplace. Physical exertion aided in alleviating his persistent apprehension. He would return home perspiring and laughing, recounting missed shots and amiable banter. His teammates were unaware of his occasional compulsive phone checks during intermissions or his consistent positioning to observe the gymnasium entrance. One evening, as I prepared our meal, my husband's phone vibrated, an unrecognized local number. He nearly ignored it, but something prompted him to answer. It was Chloe. She was weeping, offering apologies, asserting she was now undergoing therapy and comprehended her past transgressions. She pleaded for absolution, claiming Daniela had also manipulated her. My husband terminated the call without a response and immediately contacted our legal counsel. The protective order was amended to explicitly include Chloe. The attorney stated her contact technically constituted a breach, but prosecution was improbable for a solitary phone call. He recommended meticulous record-keeping and alerting the authorities if she contacted us again. That night, we invested in a superior security system. The installation felt akin to conceding defeat, but our daughter's well-being was paramount. Catherine's son and our daughter became inseparable during their play sessions. They would babble to each other in infant speech, sharing toys with the innate generosity only toddlers possess. Observing them, I recognized that our daughter would mature without familial cousins or aunts. The family we had forfeited had been supplanted by the family we selected. It was unconventional, but it was more wholesome. My husband's nocturnal terrors diminished, but never entirely ceased. He would awaken gasping, reaching for his phone to inspect the surveillance cameras. I would embrace him until his respiration stabilized, reassuring him of our safety. 3,000 miles and a protective order away. Our daughter slept through it all, oblivious to her father's anxieties. We had safeguarded her innocence, even if we had relinquished our own. His father visited for our daughter's first anniversary. He had visibly aged, the strain of managing Daniela's turmoil evident. He presented a modest gift and a substantial check, stating it was for her higher education fund. Over coffee, he confessed to holding his granddaughter with some awkwardness but great tenderness, and I perceived a newfound softness in his demeanor. He conveyed his pride in my husband for shielding his family and for disrupting the pattern of enablement that had permitted Daniela to become who she was. He reiterated his offer to assist us in relocating, should we desire a new beginning somewhere Daniela could not locate us. 2 days later, a parcel arrived lacking a return address. My husband prevented me from opening it, instead summoning building security. They meticulously inspected it before disclosing its contents. An exquisite and costly baby dress, accompanied by a note addressed to my niece. Security retained all items as evidence. The police stated it did not breach the protective order, as she had not directly contacted us, technically lawful, yet emotionally invasive. We promptly donated the garment to charity. That weekend, we located a new apartment in a distinct vicinity, one offering enhanced security and no forwarding address. As we packed, our daughter ambled about, attempting to assist by placing playthings into containers. She was oblivious to our renewed flight. To her, it was an escapade. We executed the lease agreement that afternoon, incurring additional charges for immediate occupancy. Catherine assisted our relocation, refraining from inquiries about the urgency. By Sunday evening, we were settled in our new dwelling. Our daughter adapted instantly, captivated by the altered perspective from her window. My husband and I took longer, inspecting new locks and testing new surveillance equipment, but eventually, weariness prevailed. We slept profoundly for the first time in days, our daughter secure between us. The dawn heralded another day of constructing our lives away from the turmoil, one day at a time, one minor triumph after another.